In the shadowed heart of the ancient castle, where dust motes danced like lost souls in the slivers of moonlight, the Alpha King paused at the threshold of a room long sealed by grief. Elias Thorne, the Alpha King of the Eternal Pack, was a figure carved from the night itself, eternal, unyielding, his form both regal and haunted. At what seemed an ageless 35, though centuries had etched their invisible toll, he bore the weight of immortality not as a gift, but as a curse woven into his very blood. Born in the misty highlands of 18th century Scotland to a line of shapeshifters who ruled the shadowed realms between worlds, Elias had risen as king after a brutal war against rival packs, his fangs and claws claiming victory at the cost of his humanity's last fragile threads. His trauma lingered like a scar across his soul. The loss of his wife, Leora, a dhampir of fierce grace whose half-vampiric blood had bound them in a love that defied the divide between mortal and immortal. She had perished not in battle, but in the quiet betrayal of a poisoned chalice, her death a ritual of agony that left Elias adrift in guilt. He desired only redemption, a way to atone for the lives he'd taken, the eternities he'd enforced upon his pack. Solitary by choice, he wandered the castle's labyrinthine halls, his ethics a fragile shield against the beast within, marked forever by the echo of Leora's final breath. Choose life, even in shadow. The castle, perched on jagged cliffs overlooking a restless sea, exhaled the scent of aged stone and wilted roses, Leora's favorite, now dried and brittle in forgotten vases. Tonight, the wind howled through cracked windows like a lament, carrying the faint tang of salt and something warmer, almost alive. Elias had not entered this chamber in decades. It was her sanctum, preserved as a tomb of memories, the air thick with the texture of loss. Velvet drapes in deepest crimson hung heavy, absorbing the flicker of a single candle he had lit in the corridor, its flame casting elongated shadows that twisted like specters on the walls. He pushed the door open with a creak that resonated like a sigh from the earth itself. The room unfolded before him, a four-poster bed swathed in faded silk, a vanity mirror fogged by time, and armoires brimming with gowns that whispered of dances long ended. But there, curled upon the bed as if summoned by some cruel jest of fate, lay a human girl. She slept soundly, her chest rising and falling in the rhythm of fragile mortality, oblivious to the king who now froze in the doorway. Her name was Elara Voss, 28 years old, a wanderer from the fog-shrouded villages of coastal England. Orphaned young by a fever that claimed her family, Elara had grown into a woman broken by betrayal, abandoned by a lover who fled her illness, a wasting sickness that gnawed at her lungs, leaving her breathless and disillusioned with the world's fleeting promises. She sought solace in ruins and forgotten places, her desires simple yet profound, a touch of warmth in the cold grip of her fate, a reason to endure the coughs that stained her handkerchiefs red. Tonight, driven by delirium and a storm that had battered her path, she had stumbled into the castle's hidden passages, drawn inexplicably to this room as if by an invisible thread. Elias's breath caught, a low growl rumbling in his chest, not of threat, but of profound disquiet. Humans did not trespass here. The pack's wards should have repelled her. Yet she lay there, her dark hair splayed across the pillow like ink on parchment, her skin pale as the moonlight filtering through the arched window. The candle's glow caught the delicate curve of her neck, where a pulse fluttered weakly, a reminder of the life he had long forsaken. He stepped closer, the wooden floor groaning under his weight, each creak a betrayal of the silence he craved. The air thickened with the scent of her, rain-dampened earth, and the faint, metallic hint of blood from her hidden affliction. It stirred something primal in him, a hunger not for sustenance, but for connection, forbidden and fraught. Kneeling beside the bed, Elias extended a hand, hesitating as memories flooded him. Leora's face superimposed over Alara's in the mirror's reflection. Both women bridges between worlds he could neither fully inhabit nor escape. "Who are you?" he murmured, his voice a velvet rumble that blended with the distant crash of waves. She stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering, but did not wake. In that moment, the death that shadowed his existence felt tangible, an invisible presence hovering like mist, whispering of choices, to wake her and demand answers, or to let this mortal fragility pierce the armor of his solitude. As the candle sputtered, casting their shadows into an intimate dance, Elias felt the first crack in his eternal resolve. The girl, Ilara, mumbled in her sleep, a word lost to the wind: home. It echoed in his soul, a philosophical rift opening wide. Was this intrusion fate's mockery, or the glimmer of redemption he had forsaken? He could end it swiftly, preserve the sanctity of Leora's memory. But as her warmth radiated faintly toward him, he withdrew his hand, the dilemma coiling like smoke. Outside, thunder rolled, and with it, the first drops of rain pattered against the glass, blurring the line between the living and the lost. The pack would sense her presence by dawn. Elias rose, his golden eyes reflecting the storm within. What secrets did this human carry into his wife's grave? And why did her slumber feel like an accusation against his undying heart? Ilara awoke to the scent of wax and wilted petals, her body heavy as if the bed itself sought to claim her. Disorientation wrapped around her like the crimson drapes, thick and suffocating. The room was a relic of another era, ornate candelabros tilted on mantels, their arms empty save for drips of hardened tallow, and a massive mirror dominating one wall, its surface veined with silver like fractured memories. She sat up slowly, her lungs protesting with a sharp cough that brought the coppery taste of blood to her tongue. The illness had worsened in the storm's chill, each breath a labored negotiation with mortality. Through the window, the sea churned under a sky-bruised purple, waves crashing against the cliffs in a symphony of fury and despair. Alara's fingers traced the silk sheets, cool and unfamiliar, evoking a texture of luxury she had only glimpsed in faded storybooks. How had she come here? The night blurred, fleeing the village's judgmental stares, seeking shelter in what she thought was an abandoned ruin. But this was no mere decay. It pulsed with an ancient vitality, as if the stones breathed. A shadow shifted in the corner, and she froze. Elias stood there, arms crossed, his presence filling the space like the low hum of distant thunder. Tall and broad-shouldered, clad in a dark woolen coat that spoke of timeless elegance, his eyes gleamed with an otherworldly gold, pupils dilating like a predator's in the dim light. He was no man, she realized with a shiver. Not fully. The air around him carried the faint musk of forest earth and something feral, untamed. "You trespass in a place of the dead," he said, his voice a deep timbre that resonated through her bones, calm yet laced with an undercurrent of sorrow. No anger, only a weary curiosity that unsettled her more than rage would have. Ilara pulled the sheet higher, her heart pounding in erratic bursts. I didn't mean to. The storm drove me inside. This castle, it's yours." Her words came hoarse, interrupted by another cough she stifled with her sleeve. She studied him, noting the fine lines of tension around his mouth, the way his gaze flickered to the bed as if it held ghosts. Elias nodded, stepping into the candle's glow. The light played across his features, high cheekbones, a jaw shadowed with stubble, and a faint scar tracing his collarbone, visible where his shirt parted. "It is my domain, and this room. It belongs to one who can no longer claim it." He gestured vaguely, his ethics holding him back from the full truth. Guilt was his constant companion, a chain forged in Leora's deathbed vigil, where he had failed to save her from the venom that twisted her Dhampir veins. Now, this human's frailty mirrored that loss, stirring a resistance he could not name. She rose unsteadily, her bare feet meeting the cold oak floor, each step sending tremors up her legs. The mirror caught her reflection, hollow cheeks, eyes shadowed by exhaustion, a far cry from the vibrant woman she had once been before abandonment carved its hollows. "I'm Alara," she offered, meeting his stare. "I won't stay, just point me to the way out." But Elias did not move. Instead, he approached the window, unlatching it to let the rain-scented wind rush in, carrying the salty spray that beaded on his skin like tears. "The storm rages, and you are ill." His words were not pity, but observation, philosophical in their detachment. He had seen countless mortals fade. Their choices between life and surrender a dance he could no longer join. Yet her presence here, in Leora's sanctum, felt like a ritual unfolding, unbidden, inevitable. Alara hesitated, the wind tugging at her nightgown, a borrowed garment from some forgotten drawer that smelled faintly of lavender and decay. "Illness is my shadow. It follows no matter where I go." Disillusion laced her tone. She had rationalized love as a fleeting illusion, abandoned by the man who promised eternity but fled her weakening form. Now, in this stranger's gaze, she sensed no such flight, only a profound loneliness that mirrored her own. He turned, the moonlight etching his silhouette in silver. Shadows can be shared or cast aside, but in this place, they linger. His hand brushed the dried rose on the bedside table, its petals crumbling to dust under his touch, a symbolic relic of Leora's garden, now an emblem of his unending vigil. The gesture was intimate, revealing the solitude of an immortal who chose not to die, yet yearned for the peace of oblivion. As thunder cracked overhead, Alara felt the pull of something deeper than fear, a curiosity, resisted yet blooming like the storm's wild heart. Elias watched her, the dilemma ethical and raw, to reveal his nature or let her depart into the night, untouched by his shadowed world. The rain intensified, drumming against the glass like insistent heartbeats, blurring their reflections into one. In that suspended moment, the death that haunted them both drew closer, an invisible thread weaving their fates. What if this encounter was no accident, but the first fracture in his eternal isolation? The candle had burned low, its flame a defiant flicker against the encroaching dark when Alara's cough shattered the fragile truce. She doubled over, the sound raw and wrenching, echoing off the stone walls like a plea from the depths. Elias moved instinctively, his hand steadying her shoulder, the contact electric, a spark between mortal warmth and immortal chill. Her skin burned with fever beneath his palm, a texture of life so vivid it pierced his guarded heart. "Easy," he murmured, guiding her back to the bed with a gentleness that belied his king's ferocity. The room seemed to contract around them, the velvet curtains billowing like wings in the draught, carrying the briny whisper of the sea. Ilara's eyes, wide with vulnerability, met his, and in that gaze he saw not just illness, but a soul adrift, disillusioned by betrayals that had stripped her of faith in enduring bonds. She leaned into his touch despite herself, the resistance crumbling under the weight of exhaustion. "Why help me? You don't know me." Her voice was a thread, philosophical in its quiet challenge. Life had taught her that aid came with strings, love a curse disguised as salvation. Elias released her slowly, retreating to the mirror's edge. Its surface gleamed coldly, reflecting the scar on his neck, a mark from the night Leora turned him fully, binding their eternities in blood and vow. "Because every soul deserves a choice," he replied, his tone somber, compassionate. Guilt shadowed his words. He, who had enforced immortality on his pack, now questioned its price. Leora's death had been his greatest failure, a ritual of poison that stole her half-life, leaving him to wander ethically adrift, solitary in his quest for redemption. Alara watched him, the moonlight tracing the contours of his face, illuminating the golden flecks in his eyes that hinted at the beast within. She rationalized the pull she felt, a hallucination born of fever, nothing more. Yet the air hummed with unspoken intimacy, the dried rose on the table shedding another petal, a symbol of beauty's inevitable decay. Choice? Mine was taken long ago. Abandoned, sick. What's left but to fade? He knelt before her, the floor's chill seeping through his knees, a rare vulnerability for one who ruled shadows. Fade or transform? I've seen both. The confession hung between them, heavy as the fog rolling in from the sea. Outside, rain lashed the windows, the sound a rhythmic dirge, while distant thunder mimicked the pack's howls far below. Elias's mind raced with dilemmas. Reveal the truth of his nature, risk her terror, or let her glimpse the light in his eternal dark. As her breathing steadied, Alara reached out, her fingers brushing the scar at his collar. The touch was tentative, sensual in its innocence, igniting a spark he had long suppressed. "What haunts you?" she whispered, the question a bridge across their divides. In response, Elias rose, drawing her to the window. The sea stretched endless, waves crashing in froth that glowed under the moon, a canvas of chaos and calm. A love that was both salvation and chain. She chose eternity for me, but death claimed her anyway. The words escaped unbidden, a revelation that cracked his solitude. Leora's memory flickered like the candle, her Dhampir grace a ghost in the room she once filled. Ilara's hand lingered on his arm, the warmth of her skin a stark contrast to his cool reserve. The moment stretched, introspective and charged, until a low growl echoed from the corridors, the pack stirring to the scent of human blood. Elias tensed, his ethical core warring with instinct. Protect her, or preserve the secrecy that had kept his world intact. She pulled away, eyes wide with dawning realization. "You're not human." The words were not accusation, but awe, laced with the fear of one who knew mortality's edge all too well. The candle extinguished in a wisp of smoke, plunging the room into moonlit ambiguity. Elias faced her, the dilemma ethical and profound. To let her flee into the storm, or draw her into the shadows where love could redeem them both, or curse them eternally? And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. Dawn crept through the castle like a thief, its pale light filtering past heavy drapes to gild the edges of antique furniture. Alara had not slept again. The revelation of Elias's nature lingered like the aftertaste of forbidden wine, intoxicating, terrifying. She sat by the vanity, combing fingers through her tangled hair, the mirror reflecting a woman on the precipice. Her illness clawed deeper, each breath a rasp against the velvet quiet. But now it was intertwined with a new ache. The pull toward this immortal king resisted with every rational fiber. Elias had left her briefly, his parting words a murmur of caution. "Stay within these walls. The pack senses weakness." He moved through the corridors with predatory grace, the stone floors cool under his boots, each step echoing his internal turmoil. The castle's heart was a labyrinth of tapestried halls lit by sputtering torches that cast flickering gold on portraits of long-dead alphas. His pack, loyal yet feral, gathered in the great hall below, their eyes glowing in the firelight, awaiting his command. But Elias's thoughts were ensnared by Alara, her human fragility a mirror to Leora's final days. Guilt gnawed at him. He had sworn never to bind another soul to eternity, yet her presence stirred desires long buried. Returning, he found her tracing the dried rose's stem, its thorns pricking her skin to draw a bead of blood. The scent hit him like a wave, sharp and vital, testing his restraint. "You should rest," he said, voice low, the texture of concern woven with restraint. He handed her a goblet of herbal infusion, steam rising in curls that carried notes of chamomile and iron. His subtle attempt to ease her suffering without revealing too much. Ilara accepted it, her fingers brushing his in a spark that sent warmth flooding her veins. Rest? In a castle of secrets? She sipped, the liquid soothing her throat, but her eyes held defiance. Disillusion had hardened her, yet here, in this Gothic sanctuary, she felt the stirrings of something inevitable. Tell me about her, the wife whose room this was. Elias hesitated, then sat across from her, the chair creaking like a confession. The light caught the crimson silk of Leora's gown draped over a screen, its folds shimmering like spilled blood. Leora was Dhampir, born of vampire and human, a bridge I could never fully cross. We met in war's shadow, her strength redeeming my savagery. But love became her curse. A rival's poison ended her, leaving me to choose eternity alone. His words were poetic, intimate, unveiling the ethical solitude of an immortal who enforced life upon others while denying himself peace. She leaned forward, the intimacy emotional and charged, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth from the open window. And you? What choice do you regret most? Her question delved into philosophy, probing the beauty in his suffering, the way memory clung like the castle's fog. A gust rattled the panes, carrying the distant call of gulls, sounds that blended with the slow rhythm of her breathing. Elias's gaze fell to the rose, its symbolism a tether, beauty wilted yet enduring. Choosing to live without her. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die, but what is existence without light? Ilara's hand covered his, the touch sensual in its tenderness, defying the rational walls she had built. The moment deepened, introspective, until footsteps echoed in the hall. The pack's approach, drawn by her blood's allure. Elias stood, shielding her, his growl a warning that vibrated through the room. As shadows lengthened, Ilara felt the transformation begin, not of body, but of soul. The dilemma loomed. Embrace this shadowed love, or cling to her mortal end. But the pack's howls rose, closer now, and Elias's eyes darkened with protective fury. What price would he pay to keep her from the beasts he commanded? The pack's howls reverberated through the stone, a chorus of primal hunger that set Ilara's teeth on edge. She pressed against the wall, the rough texture grounding her as fear coiled in her gut. Elias barred the door, his body a bulwark of muscle and resolve, the scar at his neck pulsing with the rhythm of his restrained beast. Moonlight slanted through the window, painting the room in stark contrasts, crimson velvet against pale stone, her fragile form against his eternal strength. "Stay behind me," he commanded, voice a rumble that carried both authority and compassion. The pack was his creation, bound by blood oaths, but their ethics mirrored his own fractured code, solitary guardians marked by guilt, yet tempted by the wild. He had led them through centuries of war, redeeming their savagery with purpose, but Ilara's scent, human, ill, alive, threatened that fragile balance. The door shuddered under heavy fists, and Elias flung it open, confronting 3 of his lieutenants. They were wolves in half form, eyes glowing amber, fur rippling along sinewy limbs. "She is under my protection," he declared, his tone unyielding, philosophical undertones weaving through, protection as redemption or as the spark of a new curse. The alpha among them, a grizzled shifter named Thorn, no relation, but an echo of Elias's own name, snarled, nostrils flaring at the air's human tang. "A mortal in Leora's chamber? This insults her memory, my king." The words stung, invoking the Dhampir queen's ghost, her love, a beacon Elias had dimmed with isolation. Ilara stepped forward, heart pounding, her cough suppressed into silence. "I'm no threat, just lost." Her voice trembled, but defiance shone in her eyes, born of disillusion's forge. Abandoned and broken, she refused to cower, rationalizing this madness as a fever dream even as the room's textures assaulted her. The metallic bite of fear sweat, the velvet's soft abrasion against her skin. Elias's hand grazed her arm, a subtle anchor, the contact intimate amid the tension. She stays. Question my choice at your peril. The standoff stretched, slow and introspective, the wind outside whipping the cliffs into a frenzy, waves crashing like judgments from the deep. Thorn backed down, but not without a lingering glare, his form shifting fully to wolf as he retreated. The door closed, sealing them in charged silence. Ilara exhaled shakily, leaning into Elias, the warmth of his body a stark contrast to the chill seeping from the stones. They fear me, or what I represent. He turned to her, golden eyes softening in the candlelight he relit, its flame dancing like captive stars. They fear change, as do I. Confession spilled forth, poetic and raw, his trauma of Leora's ritual death, the poison's slow burn that mirrored Ilara's illness, his desire for a love that transcended without demanding eternity. She traced the rose's petal in his palm, the symbol now shared, its dryness a metaphor for their resisted bond. The air hummed with sensory depth. The distant sea's roar, the faint glow of his skin under moonlight, the emotional texture of vulnerability laid bare. Love isn't a choice for the broken, she whispered, rationalizing even as inevitability drew her closer. It's a wound that never heals. Elias cupped her face, the touch sensual, redemptive, his thumb brushing her fevered cheek. In that suspended breath, philosophy intertwined with desire, the beauty of suffering as the forge of transformation. But a shadow flickered in the mirror. Not theirs, but a glimpse of eyes watching from the dark. The pack's loyalty wavered, whispers of challenge stirred. As Ilara's lips parted in unspoken invitation, Elias pulled back, the dilemma ethical and searing. To kiss her now would ignite the curse he feared, binding her to shadows. Yet the howls resumed, closer, and he knew the night demanded a choice: confront the pack's unrest or lose her to the very beasts he ruled. Night deepened, the castle's halls alive with the pack's restless prowls, their shadows slinking like smoke through torchlit corridors. Ilara followed Elias downward, her steps faltering on the spiral stairs, each one a negotiation with her weakening body. The air grew cooler, laced with the earthy musk of fir and stone, the distant echo of waves, a constant underscore to their descent. She clung to the banister, its carved wolves rough under her palms, a tactile reminder of the world she had stumbled into. Elias glanced back, his expression a mask of controlled turmoil. The great hall, he explained softly, where truths are laid bare. His ethics compelled this, to present her openly, affirm his choice, lest the pack's guilt-fueled doubts fracture their fragile unity. Leora's death had sown seeds of division, her Dhampir blood a reminder of vulnerabilities immortals pretended to outgrow. The hall unfolded grandly, vaulted ceilings lost in gloom, a long oaken table scarred by centuries of feasts and fights, flanked by candelabros ablaze with flames that crackled like whispered secrets. The pack assembled, 24 strong, their forms shifting between man and beast, eyes reflecting the fire's gold. Thorn stood at the fore, arms crossed, a challenge in his stance. Ilara entered at Elias's side, the room's heat enveloping her like an embrace, contrasting the chill of fear. Conversations hushed, all gazes turning to her, the human intruder, her pallor stark against the velvet blacks and deep reds of their attire. She felt exposed, her illness a visible frailty in this den of eternity, yet she lifted her chin, disillusion forging resolve. "I come in peace," she said, voice steady despite the cough building in her chest. Elias ascended a dais, his presence commanding silence. "This woman is no prey. She is under my ward, a guest in our shadows." His words wove philosophy into decree, redemption through acceptance, the beauty of human suffering as a light in their endless night. He spoke of Leora, her Dhampir love, a bridge that had redeemed him once, now echoed in Alara's gaze. The pack murmured, some nodding, others growling, guilt and solitude their shared burdens, marked by wars where choices between life and death had scarred them all. Thorn stepped forward, voice gravelly. A human, in Leora's wake. What transformation do you seek, my king? The question hung, introspective, probing the ethical core of their bond. Alara interjected, stepping into the firelight, her shadow elongating like a specter. Transformation. I've lost everything, family to fever, love to fear. If this place offers truth, I'll face it. Her words were poetic, intimate, revealing traumas that mirrored Elias's, abandonment's sting, the rationalization of isolation as survival. The pack parted slightly, allowing her to approach Elias. He descended, taking her hand, the contact a ritual of sorts, his cool skin against her fevered warmth, the dried rose tucked into her pocket a talisman of their shared symbolism. The moment slowed, sensory and cinematic, flames popping, breaths sinking, the faint scent of pine from the wolf's fur mingling with her rain-washed hair. In the charged hush, Elias leaned close, his whisper for her alone. You awaken what I thought dead. The love brewing was inevitable, resisted no longer, a redemptive force coexisting with the curse of his world. But as their fingers intertwined, a low snarl erupted, Thorn lunging, not at her, but in challenge to Elias's softening rule. Claws extended, the fight erupted in a blur of motion, Elias shifting partially to meet him, fur rippling across his arms. Alara backed away, heart racing, the hall's textures assaulting her, the slick of sweat, the metallic tang of impending blood. Elias subdued Thorn with a dominant pin, golden eyes blazing. She stays, or I fall with her. The pack submitted, but tension lingered like fog. As Elias returned to her, bloodied but unbowed, Alara saw the cost, his ethical solitude cracking, love's transformation demanding sacrifice. Yet in his gaze, she glimpsed eternity's allure and its terror. What if the pack's whispers turned to betrayal, forcing a choice between her life and his throne? If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts. Embers glowed in the great hall's hearth long after the pack dispersed, casting a ruddy light that danced across Elias and Alara like fleeting promises. She sat beside him on a fur-draped bench, the texture soft against her aching limbs, while he cleaned the shallow gashes from the skirmish, marks from Thorn's claws, superficial to an immortal but symbolic of deeper rifts. The air hummed with residual tension, the scent of singed wood and blood mingling with the sea's eternal brine wafting through high windows. Alara's hand trembled as she touched his wounds, her fingers tracing the healing edges with a sensuality born of concern. You fought for me. Why? Her voice was a whisper, philosophical, probing the dilemmas of his eternal choice. Disillusion had taught her that protection often masked possession, yet Elias's actions felt redemptive, a light piercing her shadowed existence. He captured her hand, holding it to his chest where his heart beat with unnatural steadiness, a rhythm that mocked her own erratic pulse. Because in you, I see a reflection of what I lost. Leora chose me, Dhampir to my alpha, her love a curse that bound us beyond death. But you offer a chance to choose differently. His confession was intimate, poetic, unveiling the guilt that solitary nights had amplified. Failing to save Leora from her ritual end, the poison twisting her veins as Alara's illness now twisted hers. The dried rose lay between them on the bench, its petals loosening in the warmth, a recurring emblem of wilted beauty reborn in vulnerability. Elias rose, pulling her with him toward a side chamber off the hall, a private alcove with walls lined in ancient tomes and a single candelabro flickering like a confessional flame. Here, away from prying eyes, the atmosphere turned introspective, the slow drip of wax sinking with rain pattering outside. "Tell me your story," he urged, seating her on a cushioned chaise, his body close enough that she felt the cool aura of his immortality. Elara spoke haltingly, words flowing like a catharsis, her origins in a windswept English village, the fever that stole her parents, the lover's abandonment as her lungs failed, leaving her broken and wandering. "I sought ruins for peace, not this," she admitted, rationalizing the bond forming as delirium's trick, even as inevitability warmed her core. Elias listened, his golden eyes reflecting the candle's glow, compassion softening the king's severity. "Ruins are where the dead whisper choices. Mine was to endure, to lead without love. But you awaken the man beneath the beast." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, the touch lingering, sensual without vulgarity, awakening textures of emotion. The velvet brush of his breath on her skin, the distant thunder's rumble mirroring her quickening heart. In that moment, the ritual unfolded, not of blood, but of revelation. Elara leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both redemption and risk, slow and profound, tasting of salt tears and unspoken vows. It was resisted no longer, the love of force coexisting with suffering, transforming isolation into shared shadow. Death hovered, invisible, in her fragile breaths, yet the kiss defied it, a philosophical embrace of life's fleeting beauty. But as they parted, breathless, a shadow crossed the alcove's threshold. Thorn returned with allies, eyes gleaming with mutiny. "The pack demands purity," he growled. "No human taints the throne." Elias stood, shielding her, his form tensing for battle. The dilemma ethical and raw: defend this nascent love or sacrifice it to preserve his rule. Elara's hand gripped his, the rose crumbling in her pocket, its dust a portent. As claws scraped stone, the night teetered on the edge of tragedy, or transcendence. What vow would break first, his to the pack or theirs to each other? The alcove's fragile sanctuary shattered like fragile glass under the onslaught of Thorn's betrayal, the heavy oaken door splintering inward with a resonant crack that echoed through the chamber like the fracture of ancient vows. Shadows leaped alive in the torchlight, twisting into grotesque forms as the challengers, 5 burly shifters, their eyes burning with amber fire, poured into the space. Their growls a cacophony that drowned the distant sea's murmur. Elias reacted with the fluid precision of centuries-honed instinct, his body coiling like a spring before exploding into motion. He shoved Elara behind a towering bookshelf lined with leather-bound tomes that smelled of aged vellum and forgotten incantations, the spines pressing against her back like silent guardians. "Stay low," he hissed, his voice a urgent rumble laced with the raw edge of fear. Not for himself, but for her fragile mortality caught in the crossfire of his immortal world. Elara's heart thundered in her chest, a frantic drumbeat that synced with the ragged pulls of air into her diseased lungs, each inhale laced with the metallic tang of her own blood-tinged coughs. The air thickened with the visceral textures of conflict, the musky reek of wolfish fur matted with sweat, the sharp sting of claws raking stone, and the warm, coppery spray of the first blood drawn as Elias intercepted the lead challenger. His claws extended with a sickening snick, slicing through the attacker's shoulder in a blur of crimson arcs that splattered the velvet-draped walls, turning the deep red fabric into a macabre tapestry of their struggle. Elias's form shifted partially, fur rippling across his broad shoulders and arms, his golden eyes narrowing to slits of predatory focus. He was no mere man in this moment, but the Alpha King in his elemental fury, ethical, yes, bound by a code that forbade needless slaughter, but solitary no longer. His guilt over Leora's death fueling a protective rage that made him a whirlwind of restrained savagery. Thorn circled the fray like a specter of doubt incarnate, his massive frame half-shifted, muscles bulging beneath a pelt of coarse gray fur, his scarred muzzle pulled back in a snarl that revealed fangs glistening with saliva. "You've gone soft, Elias," he spat, his voice gravelly and thick with accusation, each word punctuated by the thud of paws on the flagstone floor. A human whelp in Leora's shadow? She was Dhampir, strong, eternal. This frailty mocks us all. The pack's unrest stemmed from their shared traumas, the centuries of war and loss that had left them marked by guilt, solitary wanderers in Elias's shadow, enforcing his edicts while harboring their own quiet despairs. Thorn's challenge was philosophical at its core, a probe into the ethics of eternity. Could redemption come from embracing mortality, or did it dilute the choices they had all made to endure? Ilara crouched in the dim recess, her fingers digging into the rough wool of Elias's discarded coat draped over a nearby chair, its fabric still warm from his body heat, a fleeting anchor amid the chaos. Her mind reeled, rationalizing the madness as a fevered hallucination born of her wasting illness, yet the sensory assault was too vivid to deny. The acrid bite of smoke from a toppled candelabro, its flames licking greedily at a fallen tapestry, sending curls of black smoke snaking toward the vaulted ceiling. The wet smack of flesh against flesh as Elias grappled another shifter, hurling him into a side table that splintered under the impact, scattering porcelain figurines of long-extinct beasts across the floor in a cascade of delicate shards. She resisted the urge to flee, her disillusion with life's cruelties hardening into a defiant resolve. Abandonment had broken her once, but this bond with Elias felt inevitable, a redemptive thread weaving through the suffering that defined her existence. Elias dispatched the second attacker with a precise strike to the throat, not lethal, but incapacitating, his ethics holding the line even as blood slicked his hands and forearms, the warm viscosity cooling rapidly in the alcove's chill draft. He pivoted toward Thorn, chest heaving, the scar at his neck throbbing with the pulse of his barely contained beast. "This is no mockery," he growled, his tone laced with introspective sorrow, the words carrying the weight of his solitary vigils. "Leora's love was my curse and salvation, her Dhampir blood binding me to choices I still question. But Ilara, she reminds me of the light we immortals forsake. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die, Thorn. What have we become if we fear the very humanity that birthed us?" The words hung in the smoke-hazed air, a philosophical gauntlet that gave Thorn pause, his advance faltering for a heartbeat. But loyalty to the pack's old ways won out. He lunged with a roar, claws aimed for Elias's flank. Ilara could bear it no longer. Her hand closed around a jagged shard of porcelain from the shattered figurines, its edge biting into her palm as she drew blood, the pain sharpening her focus. She darted forward, swinging the improvised weapon at Thorn's hind leg, the blow glancing but enough to draw his attention, a snarl twisting toward her. "Leave him!" she cried, her voice hoarse and breaking on a cough that sprayed fine mist into the air, the illness's grip tightening like an invisible noose. Elias seized the distraction, tackling Thorn with bone-jarring force, the two alphas rolling across the floor in a tangle of limbs and fury, toppling a sideboard laden with silver goblets that clattered like tolling bells. The pack hesitated, their growls softening into uncertain whines, the ethical dilemma rippling through their ranks like a wave. Ilara backed away, vision blurring from exertion and fever, the dried roses' remnants now ground to dust in her pocket, symbolizing the fragility of their budding love, wilted yet resilient against the storm. With a final, dominant twist, Elias pinned Thorn beneath him, claws at his throat, golden eyes blazing with compassionate authority. "Yield, brother, for the pack's sake and ours." Thorn's resistance crumbled, his form shifting back to human, chest rising and falling in submission. The challengers followed suit, slinking into the shadows, leaving the alcove a ruin of overturned furniture, smeared blood, and smoldering embers. Elias rose, turning to Alara with a gaze softened by relief and deeper emotion, pulling her into his arms amid the wreckage. Her body trembled against his, the textures intimate and raw, the rough scrape of his bloodied shirt against her cheek, the steady thrum of his immortal heart contrasting her erratic breaths, the faint lavender scent of her hair mingling with the acrid aftermath. "You fought with me," he murmured, his lips brushing her forehead in a kiss that was sensual, tender, a ritual of survival. The love between them had transcended resistance, becoming a force of transformation, redemptive, tragic, coexisting with the death that shadowed her every step. But as they caught their breath, a low howl echoed from the corridors, signaling the pack's retreat was temporary. Elias's expression darkened, the dilemma ethical and profound. The unrest would fester unless confronted at its source. He guided Alara toward a concealed door leading to the outer battlements, the night air rushing in like a cold embrace, carrying the sea's salty roar. The cliffs loomed ahead, waves crashing in frothy fury below, moonlight gilding the stone path in silver. "We face them together," he said, his hand enveloping hers, the bond a beacon against the encroaching shadows. Yet as distant howls swelled anew, Alara wondered, could their love redeem the pack's doubts, or would it demand a sacrifice that shattered everything? The battlements clung to the castle's jagged spine like the ribs of some ancient leviathan, wind-whipped and exposed under the moon's unyielding scrutiny, as Elias and Alara emerged from the hidden passage into the heart of the storm's aftermath. The sea below churned with relentless fury, waves hurling themselves against the cliffs in explosive bursts of foam that glowed phosphorescent in the pale light, their thunderous crashes a symphony of chaos that drowned the pack's approaching howls. Salt spray misted the air, beading on Alara's skin like tears of the ocean, mingling with the sweat and blood from the alcove's melee, creating a tactile veil of salt and stickiness that clung to her like a second skin. Her lungs rebelled with every gust, the illness manifesting in deep, racking coughs that bent her double, forcing her to grip the weathered stone parapet for support, its rough, lichen-crusted surface scraping her palms raw, a grounding pain amid the vertigo of height and peril. Elias stood sentinel at her side, his form a bastion of unyielding strength, the partial shift receding to leave him in his regal human guise, though fur lingered faintly along his jawline and his claws retracted with a soft click. Blood streaked his face and arms, drying into dark rivulets that traced the contours of his muscles, the metallic scent sharp against the briny wind. His golden eyes scanned the darkness, ethics warring with instinct. He had built this pack from the ashes of war, redeeming their feral natures with purpose and solitude, each member marked by guilts as deep as his own, losses in battles where choices between life and eternity had scarred their souls. Leora's death, that ritual of poisoned betrayal, had been the fracture point, her Dhampir grace a light they all mourned, and now Alara's presence threatened to widen the chasm. "They come," he murmured, his voice a low timbre that cut through the gale, compassionate yet resolute. "Thorn leads them still, but doubt weakens him. We end this here, under the open sky." Alara straightened, wiping blood-flecked spittle from her lips with the back of her hand, her dark hair whipping wildly like tendrils of night. Disillusion had forged her resilience. The abandonment by her lover, the fever that stole her family, had left her broken but not brittle. She rationalized the pull toward Elias as the delirium of fever and adrenaline, yet the inevitability of their bond pulsed like a living thing, warm and insistent against the cold dread coiling in her gut. End it how? With more blood? Her question was philosophical, introspective, probing the beauty in their shared suffering, the way love could redeem even as it cursed, transforming isolation into a defiant unity. The dried rose's dust, scattered now across the battlements by the wind, fluttered like spectral petals, its symbolism a poignant refrain, wilted beauty enduring, a emblem of choices made in shadow. The pack crested the far end of the battlements, a phalanx of shifting forms emerging from the castle's maw. Thorn at the vanguard, his gray-furred bulk heaving with exertion, flanked by a dozen loyalists whose eyes gleamed with feral uncertainty. Their paws scraped the stone with guttural scrapes, the sound blending with the wind's howl, creating an auditory tapestry of impending judgment. Torches flickered in their wake, carried by the rearmost shifters, casting elongated shadows that danced like wraiths across the narrow path, illuminating the crimson stains on their muzzles from the alcove's skirmish. Thorn halted paces away, his half-shifted form towering, breath fogging in the chill air as he fixed Elias with a glare laced with reluctant respect. "The pack demands clarity, my king," he rumbled, his voice carrying over the wave's roar. "Your human drags us toward ruin. Leora's memory deserves better than this mortal echo, weak, fleeting, a curse upon our eternity." Elias stepped forward, positioning himself between Alara and the pack, his stance broad and unyielding, the wind tugging at his bloodied coat like insistent fingers. "Ruin or redemption," he countered, his tone poetic and intimate, weaving philosophy into the charged standoff. The moonlight etched his features in stark relief, the high planes of his cheekbones, the scar at his neck pulsing faintly, a visible testament to Leora's binding love. Leora chose me, Dhampir to Alpha, her blood a bridge across our divides. She taught me the tragedy of immortality, solitary guilt, endless choices without end. But Alara, she is no echo. She is the light we have forgotten, the human suffering that makes eternity bearable. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die. Why hoard the shadows when love offers transformation? The pack shifted uneasily, murmurs rippling through their ranks like wind over fur, the ethical dilemma etching lines of doubt on their faces. Some lowered their heads, golden eyes flickering with memories of their own lost humanities, traumas of wars where they had enforced Elias's will only to wander solitary in the aftermath. Alara, emboldened by his words, moved to his side, her hand finding his despite the tremor in her limbs, the contact a sensual spark amid the peril, his cool skin grounding her fevered warmth, fingers intertwining like roots seeking soil. "I am no curse," she declared, her voice steady though laced with the rasp of illness, the wind carrying her words to the pack's ears. "I've known death's shadow, family lost to fever, love fled from my frailty. But here, with him, I choose life, even if it's brief. Isn't that the redemption you all seek? The beauty in suffering, not despite it, but through it?" Thorn's snarl faltered, his massive form tensing as the philosophical weight settled. The standoff stretched, slow and cinematic, the sea's rhythm underscoring the tension, waves cresting in slow builds before crashing in cathartic release, mirroring the pack's internal turmoil. A young shifter at the rear whined softly, shifting back to human form, his eyes wide with dawning empathy. Others followed, the air humming with the subtle pops of bones realigning, fur receding to reveal scarred flesh. Thorn held Elias's gaze, the invisible specter of death hovering in the space between them, not as destroyer, but as catalyst, urging the final choice. With a guttural sigh, Thorn dropped to one knee, head bowed in submission, the pack echoing the gesture in a wave of capitulation. "Forgive our blindness, Alpha. Lead us, with her light." Elias extended a hand, pulling Thorn to his feet, the ritual of reconciliation sealing the fracture. No blood spilled here, only the redemptive flow of understanding. The pack dispersed into the night, their forms melting into the mist rolling off the sea, leaving the battlements hushed save for the wind's sigh. Dawn broke then, tentative and golden, its rays piercing the horizon to bathe the cliffs in hues of rose and amber, colors evoking the castle's velvet depths, the candle flames of intimate confessions. Elias turned to Alara, enveloping her in an embrace that lifted her from the stone's chill, his lips claiming hers in a kiss profound and unhurried, sensual in its depth, the taste of salt and blood, the texture of his stubble against her skin, breaths mingling in a rhythm that defied her illness's grasp. It was love's culmination, tragic in its fragility, redemptive in its endurance, a choice between life and eternity suspended in tender suspension. "You have given me purpose anew," he whispered against her mouth, golden eyes shimmering with unshed tears, compassion softening the king's eternal mask. Ilara melted into him, the warmth of dawn chasing the night's shadows from her bones, though a faint cough lingered as reminder of trials yet to unfold. The sea calmed below, waves lapping gently like a lullaby, the wind carrying the scattered rose dust toward the horizon. A final, symbolic farewell to isolation. Hand in hand, they descended from the battlements, the castle awakening around them in soft glows of morning light filtering through arched windows. Their bond had oscillated through light and shadow, suffering and transcendence, emerging not cursed, but chosen, a narrative of immortals and mortals weaving fates in quiet defiance. Yet as they entered the sunlit halls, Elias's gaze lingered on her paling cheeks, the ethical dilemma evolving. Could their love heal her mortal wounds, or would it demand a deeper ritual, one where mercy resurrected even the most damned? The echoes of their story lingered, whispers on the wind, inviting souls to ponder the beauty of choices made in the dawn's embrace. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned.